Okay, so welcome to Monarch Staffing's first 2021 webinar panel discussion on Change, Adapt, and Thrive. I am Laura Casper, the owner of Monarch Staffing and your host today. And Monarch Staffing is a staffing, training, and HR consulting firm in the Philadelphia region. We've placed over 10,000 employees, and this year we're celebrating our 20th year anniversary. And we wanted to do something special and share all the great stories that businesses that are doing so well with changing, adapting, and thriving in today's turbulent climate. We all know this past year has really thrown us curveballs between the COVID pandemic, the social unrest, and the presidential election. We want this to be an interactive webinar, so if you can use the chat button now and just share with us maybe one thing that you hope to learn from this session, we will cover it. We'll also have time at the end for the panel questions. And just a reminder, if you can keep yourself on mute during the session, that would be great. And, I understand this is your lunchtime. So if you want to grab your lunch, have your drinks, no judgment here. So whatever you want to do there, that would be great. I'm excited to introduce our amazing panel and have them share with you how their businesses and themselves have embraced change over the past year and share their experiences in navigating uncertainty. So first we have Diane Hart, who is the Global Chief Human Resource Officer with IPS, Integrated Project Service, an LLC, where she has oversight of the global human resource function spanning across 10 countries that include talent acquisition, talent leadership and development, organizational design. And prior to joining IPS, she served as the Senior Global Director of Human Resources for a $9 billion global chemical company. Diane brings diverse experience in the field of human resources, talent acquisition, and her specific areas of expertise include leadership formation, organizational turnaround, workforce planning, and enterprise transformation. Diane, welcome. Next, we have Dana Kaiser, who is the Vice President and HR Business Partner with Radian Group. Dana oversees talent planning, organizational development, talent management, and serves as the strategic business partner and human resource consultant for Radian's diversified mortgage and real estate business. She's also a leader in the company's inclusion and diversity efforts. And prior to joining Radian, she led the HR department at Tryon Group and served in the HR management and talent acquisition roles for IBC. Dana, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Next, we have Pam Stepflow, who is the founder of PS Squared, talent strategist and certified Clifton Strength coach. Throughout Pam's career, she served as the VP of Talent Development at a healthcare startup and spent 18 years at SAP, leading a variety of talent and leadership development functions before creating PS Squared Advisors, a small boutique consulting firm helping organizations design and implement holistic talent strategies. Welcome, Pam.
Nice to be with everybody today.
Yeah, ladies, nice to have you. But before we jump in, I'm going to ask Diane first and then Dana to kind of just give us a brief update on their current state and with their employers. So this way you can kind of have a perspective from them on where they are coming from. And Pam is our consultant on the panel. And later you'll hear from Pam what she is seeing with her clients. So Diane, I'll turn it over to you first.
Sure. Thank you so much for that warm welcome, Lauren. Hello, everyone. Good morning, soon to be afternoon. My company, IPS, is a AEC firm. It stands for Architecture, Engineering, and Construction Consulting Firm. And what we do and we focus on life sciences. Our life sciences focus is primarily pharma. We build, we design, we validate pharmaceutical manufacturing facilities in order to get their product to market. So what we've learned, and unfortunately in this crisis, what we've learned is we've actually thrived. Our business is booming better and greater and bigger than ever, but it's extremely fast paced. So that fast pace internally translates into how we serve our customers, our clients as well. So what we pride ourselves in is what we're doing is helping those clients we're playing a small part, but a part in saving and improving lives across this COVID crisis. So getting their product, which is in this case, a lot of our projects are around the COVID vaccination, and getting that out the door through their manufacturing cycle and out the door and distributed to the, of course, the patient population. So that feels really good to us and our employees. So a couple of things, though, we've discovered along the way, though, is around several innovative ways that we've been able to discover that we would not normally discover without this COVID crisis. And that's further finding ways to be efficient and be fast, because typically the ramp up time to commercialization could be anywhere from 12 to 1 year to 3 years, potentially. And we were able to get things out the door within 6 to 8 months, helping them design and get things out faster and better than ever before. So cleanliness is also a big part of what we do, and making sure that that is in place for them. And some of the innovative things that we've done is created module types of offerings, service offerings to them, structures to be able to put into a particular facility and pull right back out and go to another facility if they needed to help with that fast pace to get to market.
Diane, let me just interrupt for a minute. Now, how's the state? Like, is everybody hybrid in office, everybody remote? You have a global organization. Can you share with us where people are and what that looks like?
Yes, we're, I'd say 80 to 90% remote. Wow. We do have a population, a 10 to 20% population that is at the client site. But we've been able to mitigate out of the 3 divisions that we have. 2 of the divisions don't necessarily have to be at the client. I'd say 1.5. One of the divisions, more than half of their population does, because they're validating the physical equipment at the facilities. And then our construction division primarily is on site. So we have lots of moving parts and paying close attention to where people are and what they're doing.
Okay, that's great. I'm going to ask Dana just to give us a quick update on like her status and what the company looks like in your locations and where they are, just so we can kind of see that, it's 2021. A lot has changed over the past year.
Right. It definitely has.
Yeah.
This has definitely been the year of change.
Yeah.
Whether we were ready for it or not.
Yeah.
So Radian Group is a mortgage insurance and real estate services company. So anyone that's ever needed, when they got a mortgage and needed PMI as part of their mortgage, we sell PMI to banks. So we're primarily a B2B company. And our biggest customers are Wells Fargo, US Bank, Bank of America, large financial institutions. So we have about 1,600 employees stretched across the US. So we are a US company. And we have our primary office is in Philadelphia. So our headquarters is based in Philadelphia, where about half of our employees are based. And then we have some other satellite offices in Pittsburgh, one in Tampa, Denver, Salt Lake City, and a small office outside of Dallas. So our employees are pretty dispersed, and we had about probably 400 to 500 remote employees prior to the pandemic. So when March hit, we kind of flipped a switch and everyone went fully remote almost overnight, as did, I'm sure, most of you with your workforce. And we've been that way since March. I'm thankful to work for an organization, and our CEO and leadership team have kept employee safety as the #1 driving force in decisions around our offices. And thankfully, similar to Diane, is that our company is thriving right now. Mortgage rates are at an all-time low. Lots of people are refinancing. While the housing market was on pause for a while, where people couldn't actually go in and view homes, that has picked up since lockdown restrictions have loosened. So we've been extremely busy, which is a good thing. And we've been able to shift to remote work in a smooth way. So we haven't had the need or the force to kind of drive us back into the office. So as of right now, our offices will stay closed until I think we said April would be the earliest they would reopen. We have about 85 to 90 employees that need to go into the office on some level of frequency. based on their jobs. You know, a lot of our title operations still have some manual processes that we're working to try to automate, but we need some folks in the offices there. We try to limit the number of people going into an office on any given day, and the frequency. Some of our finance folks have to go in, but they only go in once a week, for example. And we try to stagger that with other departments that may need to go in once a week for a specific need, that kind of thing. So that is where we are.
Okay.
And we're looking ahead into the future in terms of what can we offer to employees in terms of choice and flexibility with their work location and their work environment going forward.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Mhm.
So I'm going to kind of jump right into our first question, and then I'm going to ask the panelists if they can kind of share, you know, just overall how the pandemic, the social unrest, you know, has played into your company's overall culture shift and change over the past year. And then what kind of has changed in regards to diversity, you know, and inclusion. And I'll have Dana take the lead, and then Diane, and then Pam will jump in. So can you share with us
Sure.
about that piece? I know you also head up the diversity and inclusion for your company too. So I would love to hear about that as well.
Yeah, we were fortunate in that we really kicked our inclusion and diversity efforts into high gear probably in 2019. And I joined Radian at the end of 2018. So I had some experience in the D&I space at Tryon as well as at Independence Blue Cross. So when Radian, when our CEO was really driving the decision to be more intentional around our efforts with inclusion and diversity, I was happy to raise my hand and get involved. So we had actually just established an inclusion and diversity council at Radian. I think their first meeting was March 6th. So just 10 days later, everyone got forced home.
Wow.
But it was good that we had already started taking steps and like I said, being more intentional around our efforts as opposed to just focusing on BAU, what's the right thing to do, things like that. I would say the events of 2020 really allowed us and gave us an opportunity to engage our employees in a way that we may not have otherwise. You know, when the protests started to occur and the civil unrest regarding racial inequity happened, two of our council members came forward and said, we'd like to host an open discussion with our employees and, you know, hear from them. What are their experiences? How are they reacting to this? You know, what are the things that they're trying to process? And it was great. So we hosted a couple of open Zoom sessions. We sent out a couple videos for people to watch. There's Procter and Gamble videos. One's called The Look and one's called The Talk. So if you haven't seen them, I can share the links with Laura and we can send them out. But they're really thought provoking. And for me, it was a video that really kind of defined white privilege. And that's what really resonated with me. So they hosted these discussions. We heard a lot of different experiences from our employees, but we also got a lot of resources and ideas from those discussions. And we really found that people were excited to be part of how to make things better and how we can do better at the organization. So we really were able to capture the ideas that our employees had and engage them in that process going forward. So we found that to be a really big positive from some not so positive events that occurred this year. The other thing relative to the pandemic is that it really forced us to be more purposeful on our communications. And you kind of get stuck in such a routine and a comfort level that you kind of, you know, communicate in a certain way. And when everybody was forced to be remote, our CEO started sending weekly messages to all of our workforce to keep them informed with what was going on, obviously from a pandemic standpoint, but also it's continued to this day. So he's continued to stay connected with our employees in that way. Several of our leaders started doing virtual roundtables with employees, and we, you know, having that more of a intentional focus on communication with our workforce. We found that even our employees that were virtual prior to the pandemic felt that they were more connected than they had been before. So some positive outcomes from an unexpected year.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. And then Diane, do you want to add some insight to that on how your company and the culture really has changed, and what kind also has changed around the diversity and inclusion?
Sure. And to piggyback on a lot of what Dana has already said, we had similar experiences. So culturally, I'll start with culturally, and then I could segue into our diversity initiative. But the cultural change, there's many different factors, right? We're more empathetic. I think we're more patient with one another, we've found. And again, this whole crisis has provided us an opportunity, and that's how we've embraced this. This is truly an opportunity for a case for change that we not normally would have been able to get off the ground as fast, as effective, and embracing every employee as possible and reaching deep into the organization. So resilience is another word that comes to mind. Adaptability. We're extremely more adaptable than we ever thought we could be. Being a consulting company, FaceTime was really, really important. Collaboration was is one of our core values, and what we stand for. Knowledge, passion, is everything to us. So that ability to collaborate all the time, to be able to figure out how to do that remotely was such a huge aha for the organization, and actually put some peace of mind into some of the leaders, because they were getting so many requests prior to COVID about this whole work from home and some hybrid approach that they were fairly resistant to do because of that collaboration piece. So our ability to pivot, we found that we're so much more resilient that way. We pride ourselves around collaboration. So being that in-person, that in-person touch, we have found it challenging, though, as leaders, to be able to keep that touch point going without having any type of fatigue when it comes to Teams or Zoom calls all the time. Right. Being able to balance that relationship, but fostering that relationship through that more virtual touch point. We found that at the end of the day, it's equally as important, equally as effective to be able to do it virtually as in person as well. So we're most likely going to keep some type of hybrid work from home, remote work type of structure. Now, in terms of diversity, diversity has just exploded within IPS, and it's such a cool thing to watch and see the level of engagement and the passion around it. We've brought in a consultant to make sure that we do this right out of the gate and build the right foundation that's going to sustain us for many, many years to come. So she's started, she's in her third month or so now. We'll have her till the end of March. What we've been able to accomplish is we now have a council. So there's 12 people within the organization. We have leaders within that council. We have it tied to a governance structure where myself and the regional president is the executive sponsors, and we make that connection back to the executive committee, up to the CEO. So there's this continuity of constant sharing and the ability for this council to be successful because the executive committee, the CEO in particular, is connected and making these decisions with them. So it helps with speed of decision making and things to that nature as well. We have an ERG that formed, our Black community of employees, and we have built and started a mentoring program with 2 underserved community schools in Philadelphia, public schools. One being it's not considered designation STEM, but it is a science and engineering high school. And then we also went into an elementary school, knowing and believing in the earlier you get these kids, the better success you will have in touching as many lives as you possibly can. So we have that going, where our intent is long-term, our vision is that bring them through high school, help them get through high school, get them exposed as much as possible to every facet of STEM, and carry them and follow them through college, give them scholarships as well. So we want to put some meat on the bones in terms of our commitment financially, and then internships will be available to them, and hiring them hopefully at the end of the day after college. So so there's that going on, but I also found another not-for-profit organization that has found similar, going into schools and being able to mentor those kids, but they found in their time in focusing on college readiness, they found that there's a population of students that don't necessarily see that fit.
Mhm.
They don't want to go to college, or they don't think that that's the right choice for them, but that's okay. But they still may have interest in STEM. So how do we get those kids also on a path to success? So we might partner with that
That's interesting.
organization as well.
That's great. Lots of changes. And then how would you say like the overall culture, like, just having, flipping the switch, like Dana said, and going overnight, how has the leadership been able to really embrace that and help the employees along the way, and yourself included?
They've actually embraced it. We have one executive in particular that was probably the strongest
Wow.
Against the whole remote work force. He was very focused and found a lot of success in FaceTime. He is our largest champion now too.
Complete turnaround.
It's amazing. It is. It's truly amazing. And we now will definitely have some type of hybrid as a result too, that we never probably would have been able to get off the ground as fast. Hybrid type of remote working relationship with the employees.
That's amazing. That's great. That's great. And then Pam, what do you see from your perspective? Because I know you do, consulting with a lot of different businesses. How are some of those cultures changing? And share about the diversity inclusion that you're seeing on that side as well, and the culture shift.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm seeing a lot of the same things that Diane and Dana are talking about that they're driving or that they're seeing within their organizations. Certainly, if I were to pick words to describe or outcomes of 2020, it would be words like opportunity, innovation, flexibility. Because I think 2020, for a variety of reasons, really allowed some organizations to leapfrog through a variety of different iterations to get them to the place where either leadership wanted them to be or whether employees wanted them to be. Say the flexibility to be able to work from home, whether that's full-time or more in a hybrid model. And so it just provided organizations with an opportunity to leapfrog over and to strip away a lot of the socialization conversations that you would normally have to have when you're trying to make that kind of a cultural change within the organization, because really organizations had no choice.
Right.
And I do think it makes a difference. Both Diane and Dana talked about the fact that today there's some portion of their workforce that's actually going into the office because their jobs require that. I think that will always be the case. And for some organizations, their entire workforce has been going to a workplace every day because they're essential workers and things like that. So I do see a difference in mind shift and in how organizations are thinking about some of these things based on both what their current work plan is in terms of we're completely virtual, we have a hybrid model of some sort, or we're completely still in the office. I think that has made a really big difference in terms of how organizations and leaders are thinking about some of the things that we're talking about on today's call. The other thing I'm seeing is that organizations, teams, leaders are needing to get really surgical and really, really intentional about the things that they're doing, and not just about what they're doing, but helping employees to understand why they're doing that. And so some simple things, but I think things that make a huge difference in terms of culture and in terms of how people show up at work every day is at the beginning, I think there was this huge push that everything happened on Zoom or happened in some way face-to-face, using either Zoom or Microsoft Teams or whatever your organization's technology of choice were. I see organizations pulling back from that a little bit and being really clear about some meetings don't need to be via Zoom. I can just be on the phone with you because there's been so much Zoom fatigue.
Definitely.
And so, I'm working with a company right now, and they actually started to make it mandatory that in the meeting invite, whoever the meeting organizer is, specify there's the expectation that people will be on camera or no need for you to be on camera for this call. I'm seeing people take more advantage, or at least when it was a little bit warmer here in Philadelphia, I'm taking a little bit more advantage of, if it's just two people on a call, let's actually get outside and let's do a virtual walk and talk.
Yeah, that's great.
If we don't have to see each other, we might as well be getting some exercise, some fresh air. I don't have to be locked down to my computer.
Right.
There's so much research coming out about Zoom fatigue and that employees are actually working longer now that they're working
Yeah.
from home, because they're not necessarily accounting for they're reutilizing their commute time and just they're commuting from their kitchen to their living room. And so they're starting their day earlier, they're ending their day later. There's even less separation and division.
Right.
And I think that's where I see leaders and the change in leaders with my organizations that I'm working with. And where the HR teams and the executives are really working with their leaders to ensure that they're helping their employees to set the right kind of boundaries, and understanding even more about the context of what's going on in somebody's personal life. So that between the organization and the employee, they can find the right flexible work situation that is a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, that is great. Yeah, I mean, I just ordered myself a standing desk yesterday, because I found myself, I mean, I can't sit too long. Like I have to be up, I got to stand, I got to do something, I got to move. So, I think, honing in on that, we just can't just be sitting the whole time. We're not meant to be doing that the whole time. And we don't get up and walk to the water cooler and have those conversations. We're not walking down the long halls, like we used to see people. So it is definitely different. I love the idea of the walk and talk. I think that's great. So thanks for sharing that. Yeah.
I think Dana, Laura, just to piggyback on that, I think Dana mentioned, that the physical safety of their employees has become even more paramount than it was prior to this. I see that across a lot of organizations in terms of organizations that sent hand sanitizer or face masks or things like that, but also some organizations that really early on said that our employees are the center of everything that we do, and we need to be able to position them to be successful while they're working from home. So here, organizations that gave allowances for people to go outfit their home office to get the right desktop, whatever, or sorry, the right desk, whatever they needed. I think all of those things are just, for many companies, are just iterations or the next evolution of the way they were already thinking about some of these things.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and I think that's great. I hear a lot of employees are getting the help that they need, and that's the way it should be. You want to make them, you want to set people up for success. So that's great. Thank you for sharing some of the ideas and what's happening in your organizations around the culture and the diversity in the councils. That's awesome.
Laura,
so I'm going to move. Yep.
Could I just add two things?
Yes, absolutely. Share. Yeah, for sure.
Forward thinking. There's two things that I know IPS is going to be embarking on. That's vaccinations. What do we do with the vaccination?
Vaccinations.
Our real estate footprint is also something that we're going to be working on. So between now and the end of the year, that's probably going to two big things that we're going to focus on this year around communication, making decisions. Some companies are considering requiring it. We're not.
Right.
Some are considering incentivizing folks to take the vaccination. Not, but some companies are. But these are the decisions that also organizations are grappling with this year.
Yeah.
And then the smaller footprint is, what do we do with all this space now?
Right.
And where is our leases coming, and having to navigate all of that as well. And hoteling, what is the desk going to look like? It's going to look different when they come back to the office, whenever that time might come.
Yeah, they're big changes that are going to come in 2021 for sure. Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And then, the next question I had was, if you could share some light and shed some light on, how your companies have changed around the teams part and the leadership management. And then Pam, as you see trends in these areas among the businesses that you consult with on leadership management and teams. So I'm going to ask you to weigh in first, and then Diane and Dana about the teams and the leadership and what changes have occurred within that area.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. I think, I think it's sort of an extension of the earlier conversation we were having, because it all sort of bleeds together. From a leadership perspective, I'm seeing that leaders really need to start to be even more thoughtful about how they're engaging with each one of their employees at a very personalized kind of level. And so again, going beyond when I get on a call with somebody saying, how are you? Because everybody will just answer fine to that. Getting really thoughtful about what questions do I want to ask my employees to really get to understand what's going on for them, what their motivation is, where they're struggling. That struggle might be work related, that struggle might be home related, and it's bleeding into what they're doing for work.
Definitely.
But at the same time, leaders need to figure out a way to set up an environment that an employee trusts in their leader, and trusts that they can have that vulnerable conversation. And so if you didn't have that kind of relationship with your employee before, when you saw them every day, there's an extra effort that you as a leader need to do, or what I'm seeing and what I'm helping coach the leaders that I work with on is you need to figure out how to build up that trust with your employees so that they can be vulnerable with you and you guys can figure out how to make this be a win-win for everybody.
Yeah.
I've seen at a higher leadership level also, and this goes to what Diane was just saying about office footprint, organizations rethinking what does it mean to have normal office hours?
Right.
And so in certain organizations, like in a lab, it may or may not matter what time people are in doing their work. And so could we think about extending our office hours to accommodate people being in the office when they need to be, but also maximizing the safety of the people, and also accommodating people's personal lives. And so if I have a spouse who has a job that's pretty rigid in terms of 9 to 5, but my job is more flexible, could I actually go work on a Saturday? And does it matter when my work, if my work is not tied to something critical in terms of hours in a day, does it actually matter where or when not where, but when I'm getting my work done?
Interesting.
And so I think the conversations that we've been having, or I've been having with some of the organizations that I work with, is how do you get rid of the boundaries that we've always had?
The traditional.
Traditional. There's, I don't know, because I didn't do the math before we got on the call, but there's 7 times 24 hours in a day where people could be working. We traditionally have put these boundaries about what a weekend is. I think this is causing leaders and leadership teams to rethink and to sort of come up with whiteboard space ideas about how work is going to get done in the future.
Yeah, the way in which we work is going to be very different.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And your employees, involving Dana and Diane both talked about involving their employees in the diversity conversation, but involving your employees in these kinds of conversations is also super critical. You're not going to be able to accommodate every request that every employee has, but your employees have great ideas about how they want to show up every single day and the kind of work they want to do in that environment that they want to be in. They're at your disposal. You might as well tap into them and get their insights and their ideas. You never know where something like that's going to lead.
Yeah.
And so I see more transparency in terms of organizations asking their employees for input beyond the traditional employee engagement survey. I see a lot more transparency in how leaders are communicating information and how often they're communicating it, and not just communicating the decision, but the why behind the decision that was made, to help employees get on board and to help bring employees along on the journey with them.
That's great.
I could talk on forever about this topic, but I am clear that Dana and Diane also have some really good insights in this topic for their organization, so I'll stop there.
Yep. Okay. Diane, do you want to shed some light on that?
Sure. So great points, really great points, Pam. And how Pam was focusing on breaking down those traditional barriers. I want to counter that point and complement that point by there's some boundaries that we actually need to create that we didn't before, right? So there is that breaking down but building up, and what I mean by that is we are so accessible to people's personal lives now, ever before. So we're seeing things and we're being part of things. In some cases, a child walks in, or there's a happy hour and a spouse joins, or whatever it might be, and we have this these guards that are starting to come down, and these guards that you normally, if you're in an office setting, in a professional office setting, you have these norms of behaviors, right? That you're standard, and that are very automatic. You don't have to think about them. But now we're in this environment where this access is in some cases maybe given us a sense of permission to behave a certain way or put down those guards that we not normally would have done or even think of doing before. And it's so subconscious, it could be so subconscious that you don't know that those boundaries have been crossed. So, in terms of happy hours, you're at home, you're safe, you're not driving. So why not have a few more than you normally would at a happy hour? That we usually have a 2-ticket limit in our company.
Right.
But at home, maybe not. So you're having this really fun conversation, or you're putting games, and the games get a little out of control. And again, it's already out of control before you even realize it's out of control. So it's those it's that awareness that we're going to ensure that our leaders understand those boundaries that need to actually be developed. And another thing too is our global teams. We have found that in our leadership, and our teams globally, there's a sense of, we're US, our global headquarters is in the US, but we're a global company. And we have found that our colleagues in Europe and Singapore and China and so on, that may have felt a little second thought in some cases.
Like the stepchild or something.
Or, yeah, they're feeling very empowered and very, in tuned with everything that's going on real time, like everybody else in the US. So it has leveled the playing field in a way that has been so refreshing and unexpected, I think, in a lot of cases. And the last thing I'll just compliment what Pam said is as far as leadership development, there are skills that our leaders do not have today, and they didn't have to have necessarily. And that is around that level of empathy, the level of empathy. They've all had empathy to some degree, but the level's got to be deeper and more overt than maybe in the past. A sense of empowerment and trust that when your employees aren't in front of you, it's okay. Empower them and trust that they're going to get whatever they're going to get done within the time frame that works for them. And that deeper level of empathy, understanding that they have kids running around them.
Right.
They have a spouse that has to work outside the home, maybe, or a dog that's barking, whatever it might be. And that's not sometimes natural to a lot of our leaders. So we're going to be focusing on that this year too.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Diane. Yeah. And Dana, how do you maybe shed some light on the leadership and teams and what you're seeing over at your company?
Yeah. So a lot of, what Pam and Diane have mentioned, I think the biggest change has been leading with empathy and providing flexibility. And, one of the things that we've seen at Radian is that there's different mindsets with our management team. And we've recognized that as a leadership team and as an HR department, we needed to give managers the permission to allow for that flexibility and to make and empower them to make those decisions that made the most sense for their teams and the people on their teams. Because there are some folks that are rule followers and they're kind of clung to, well, these are the rules that I know we had when we were in the office, so that's what I'm going to stick to. So you need to work from 8:30 to 5 o'clock. And they were going to stick with those rules because they didn't want to break the rules until somebody told them otherwise. Whereas others, would kind of make the best decision for their team, and they'd kind of ask for forgiveness later if they needed to.
Yep.
So it was important for us as an HR team to give managers the permission and empower them to lead with empathy and to have that and to figure out what works for each person on their team. Like Pam and Diane had said earlier, what works for one person is not going to be what works for someone else.
Right.
And especially in this scenario where, you're probably working at home potentially with other individuals who are working at home. You're potentially trying to homeschool children at the same time, which I don't know how working parents are doing that. So giving some people flexibility, and it's okay if somebody needs a break in the middle of the day from 11:30 to 1:30 so they could get their kids lunch and then come back online. Or if they need to start their day later because they need to get their kids set up on virtual learning, and then they just extend their day and log back on after dinner or whatever the case may be. So we found that really kind of giving managers permission to use their own judgment and to trust their instincts and to provide that flexibility has really kind of helped to break down some of those boundaries that we kind of had in place previously. The other thing that we'll continue to look at and make sure that we're providing tools and resources to our managers is what Diane mentioned, and people need to lead differently than they did before. And some folks have been able to kind of make that shift on their own because it was more natural to them. And others are still kind of, well, if I don't see them every day, I don't know if they're working. So their reaction is, well, can I get software that tells me when people are logged in? And we're trying to kind of shift away from that big brother, I need to see and touch, to more focused on outcomes.
Right.
And how can we focus on what are the outcomes that people are delivering? What are the results that they're delivering for the organization? Doesn't matter how many hours of the day they worked or what hours they were, but are they getting their work done? Are they delivering the things that we need for the organization? Are they being productive? So we'll have a big focus on helping our managers and leaders make that shift to, really kind of measuring productivity and performance on outcomes versus, some of the ways that leaders did in the past.
Yeah, that's great. Yep, that's great. Thank you.
Mhm.
And I'm going to ask too, like around the third question about, maybe, let's talk about some light on your companies and how, has the recruiting process even changed? And I don't even know that. So, I don't know if things have really changed a lot in that area. And maybe Diane, if you want to jump in and talk about a little bit about the recruiting process and how has it changed, or even if it has changed with your teams.
Yes. Thank you, Laura. Yeah, it's actually changed quite a bit. Recruiting for IPS has been very regionally focused. So when we would look for talent, we'd try to get them as close as possible to one of our offices, right? As close as possible. But we have travelers as well, which was less important. Now the net is so broad now, it's becoming less and less important.
How about that?
Where that person is, which is tremendously helping our recruitment efforts to be able to pick somebody from Seattle to work on a project in Pennsylvania and that be okay. You don't have to physically be there necessarily. Things will change a little bit when we go back into the office and we get back into the routine a bit, and it will be challenging for the organization, leadership, HR to be able to still toe that line a bit and not go too far back to where we were because of the flexibility. The next generation coming up is going to expect that.
Right. It's going to be different.
Be prepared, which we weren't,
right.
generally speaking, as an industry.
No one
really
was
prepared for that next generation. We were still kind of stuck in that mid to later in career folks. And but geography is not going to be a huge barrier for us anymore, is the one thing.
Yeah, the walls are down.
Diversity is a huge focus for us now. Again, our case for change is present, and it is helping us drive relationships with organizations like NSBE, our National Black Engineers Society Association, our HBCUs, our historical Black colleges and universities, and being able to tap into those resources and diversify our thought process. Bringing people into the organization that's going to diversify how we think, decisions we make. And it's not about a quota, or it's not about how many women versus African Americans you have. It's who do you want to see in your organization is going to challenge your thought. And sitting around a table, challenging our leaders to think and ask themselves on a frequent basis, who's missing at this table? And that's going to take time. But through the people that we bring in the organization, they're going to bring in similar people to themselves. And then it's going to spiral.
It'll happen.
It'll take less and less effort over time.
Yeah, the snowball effect. Yep.
Exactly. And in terms of training, video conferencing, having access to that kind of stuff too, that might be a little later in your questioning.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, no, share it.
But video conferencing is the access to self-driven learning is so much more plentiful now than it was a year ago. There was so much reliance on what's a company going to do for me, and how are they going to structure this training for me to be able to register and sign up, versus a push type of strategy I'm seeing with a lot of training curriculum content companies versus a pull, where they push out content as more often now. People then self-driving their careers and their own developments in the luxury and the flexibility of their own schedule at home, just having to have a certain time frame in order to develop themselves.
Yeah, there's so much more open to them. That's great. And then Dana, do you want to share about some of the recruiting and processing and how that's looking in the training on your company and what you're seeing?
Sure.
The year and how it's changed. Yep.
Yeah, we experienced something similar in that it really being a remote and having a leadership team that's open to allowing people to work throughout the US, even after it's safe to reopen our offices. It really opened up a national talent pool for us. So we also used to previously kind of recruit around the geographic areas where we had offices,
Interesting.
except for certain positions. Our underwriting positions are typically virtual and they're anywhere and things like that. But it enabled us to open up the talent pool for some of the high demand roles that we have in technology, data science, information security, which is a really hot field right now. So it allowed us to connect with candidates in talent pools that we didn't before, and really focus on, bringing in the most talented employees to the organization. It was interesting in that initially we had some leaders that were resistant to hiring folks, having only communicated with them through Zoom.
About that.
So that was something that was, it seems so long ago at this point. But I remember one of our sales leaders had an opening, and he was reluctant to pull the trigger on making an offer until he's like, he's a sales guy. He's like, I need to sit across the table from this person and shake their hand and, look them in the eye and this, that, and the other. And so we did see that in some instances, it took a little time to get folks used to the fact that they couldn't wait forever.
Yeah, it's different.
And it was, I guess the other thing that we learned is how are we assimilating people differently once they do join?
Yeah.
So our
onboarding
talent,
piece, yep.
yeah, exactly. I had an HR intern over the summer that was virtual, which was great because she was a huge lift to some of the inclusion and diversity work that we were doing. But I realized very quickly that I was the only person she was communicating with, because I was the one that was working with her, and and she and I were working closely, and I'm like, I need to get her talking to other people because she's missing out on that whole experience of learning what everyone else in the department does. So being a little more intentional on how we are making those connections for employees, not only with the people that they work with on a day-to-day basis, but getting them connected with people from other cross-functional teams and from other departments. So our talent acquisition leader has done a lot of work on our onboarding process. Our leadership team is doing a rotation now on a monthly basis to welcome employees through like a virtual coffee break.
That's great.
Which is great because they can do it over Zoom and it doesn't matter what location you're in. So it's really kind of opened up the capabilities there and the ideas. So we're trying to do some new and creative things to make sure that people feel part of the organization when they join us.
Right. Yeah. And then Diane, do you want to weigh on that on your company too with the onboarding process, if that's changed for you? And then I'll have Pam share what she's been seeing in her organizations.
Yes, we have changed our onboarding quite a bit. On a dime, we had to go straight to virtual, which was, we were flying people in.
Wow.
We were very FaceTime oriented with our
Wow. Travel expenses down.
Yes.
more for your employees' development, right?
Well, budget, yes. But yeah, it was so we had to flip that switch really fast. I have an amazing onboarding professional on my HR team that just on a dime was able to adapt and adjust. One thing that we did similar to Dana's is our regional president. This is the idea of this one of the HR folks that manages the onboarding. She requested the president to chime in to join the orientation at a certain time. So it was he was able to manage his calendar. So he makes it every single Monday. We do orientations every Monday.
That's great.
Once a week. And it's gone so far. The new employees are so wowed by being able to interact, not just seeing him introduce himself, but he chats with them and asks them about themselves. And they feel so much more welcome. And then once they get through the general orientation, there's an integration at the department level. but again, virtually. So everything that, I guess the biggest difference too, in terms of more rigor is planning. There's so much more planning, IT getting the laptops to them, you know,
Right. Oh, yeah.
and in the beginning of the pandemic, Dell, I don't know, Dana, if you're experiencing this, but Dell was so overwhelmed because every company now was giving everybody a laptop. We had all this backlog. So there were people starting, and a couple of weeks into their start, they weren't able to log in.
Equipment,
So
right?
yeah, it was so lots of adjustments from a technology, process, and structure perspective.
Yeah, that's great. And then Pam, how about on your side with the recruiting and the onboarding and training piece? What are you saying?
Yeah, so lots of similarities, and I'm guessing lots of similarities for others that are on the call as well, in terms of how people needed to flip on a dime for some things, and getting people comfortable with hiring somebody that I've actually never met. Like I've never met in person, but I'm going to entrust this person to go do whatever this job is. And I think, both Dana and Diane mentioned, it allows them to cast a wider net on who their candidates are. What I'm seeing is that at the beginning, that it became almost a pendulum swing of we only recruit geographically. Now we can recruit any place in the world, theoretically. And what I'm seeing with my clients is it's coming somewhere into the middle. And so they're getting much more specific about which jobs does that make sense for, or which roles does that make sense for, and which roles actually do we still need because it makes sense for the job for somebody to be geographically located, or because eventually we know this role, at least part of the time, is going to need to be in the office. And so getting much more intentional about it's not one or the other. But again, we're going to be really intentional about having a hybrid model about how we think about that. I think the really important thing for that is being really clear about your why around the decisions that you're making, so that people who are currently in your organization and people that you're bringing into the organization understand that there's some equity about how we're thinking about this. And it's not person to person. We're very specific about the roles or the jobs, and we're applying whatever those guidelines are or whatever those design principles are. We're applying those consistently across the board, so that people believe that those decisions are fair. So when somebody sitting who has to be in the office every day is sitting next to somebody who doesn't have to be in the office every day, they understand the reason that those decisions were made. So again, I just think a lot more intentionality around the decisions that are being made and why those decisions are being made. The other thing that I'm starting to see, and that I know from a past life is super important, is not everybody loves working from home. For not everybody is their most productive. Dana's raising her hand, right? I'm also, I like working from home, but if I had my druthers, I would go to a client site 3 days out of 5, because I get a lot of my social interaction needs met. For some people, and there's a different way that you think about the work, and there's a different way that you go about structuring your day and about the work, and not everybody has that skill or capability, nor does everybody want to build that up. And so I'm seeing that for the roles that organizations believe can be done virtually 100% of the time, they're needing to rethink the kinds of interview questions that they're asking. Get to, is this a candidate that can work well in this situation and be successful or not? Because not everybody can be, and not everybody wants to be. And so it's as much about thinking about the role and where that role needs to be located, but also are we asking the right questions of the candidates to make sure that we're making a good fit, both for us as an organization, but also for is the candidate making a good fit or a good decision based on what they know. And so how you think about assessing candidates, I think, changes slightly depending upon what your mind frame is or what your thinking is about where roles are going to be located. And then the last thing I wanted to say, which Diane touched on and Dana did as well, is just how do you onboard people who have never been in an office? How do you help them understand sort of when you're in the office, you get to see the posters, or you get to see the client stories, or you get to see we have snacks, and that's a part of our culture. And it's a silly part of our culture, but it still says something about the culture. And so how do you translate those things that are kind of intangible when everybody's together to when everybody's not together? And so I've seen, in addition to some of the things that Diane mentioned, in terms of having senior leaders show up and onboarding, their weekly onboardings, people have gotten way more creative about what's going into a welcome packet. So as an example, am I just getting a box with a laptop with no instructions whatsoever? Or is there some thought that went into, there's a laptop, there's all of my cords, there's a welcome note from my IT person, there's some set of instructions. That is a really huge difference in terms of the new employee's experience with the organization. Right. And again, says something about your culture. And it's so much more time consuming, as Diane mentioned, to do these things when people are virtual than when they're sitting in an office. And so making sure that you're also allowing the space for your employees who are currently doing that kind of work, your onboarding manager, your IT people, giving them a little bit more space to be able to do this in a thoughtful manner is what I'm seeing.
I see a whole new business brewing. Welcome kits for onboarding employees.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, there you go.
Absolutely.
Yep. There it goes.
Yep.
Entrepreneur in you.
Yeah, there it goes.
Can I offer one example to complement something?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Pam was mentioning how some roles might be okay long term after COVID remote, and some may not. And I just want to give an example where I got it wrong. I had a payroll person, and you'd think payroll, you definitely need that person close to the office as much as possible, or in the office, because it's such a critical part of, people have to get paid, right? So she wanted to relocate. She decided to relocate her family for personal reasons down to Florida, and we're in Pennsylvania, and she would do international payroll as well, but primarily the U.S. And I made a decision that that role doesn't seem to fit. Well, fast forward a couple months, she's doing great. There's absolutely no problem with her doing this remotely. We've had no issues whatsoever. So it's just interesting. And if there's HR folks on the line that are going to have these conversations with their leaders, after you may define or identify what those roles are, then go back and maybe test it out and see if maybe that original or initial decision was the right one, because I got it wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's great. And then before we turn it over to some questions, because we have some questions in the chat, I just want to, in closing, thank you all for participating. And in closing, if you could each share maybe your aha moment of 2020. And maybe Dana, if you want to go first and share that would be great. And then I'll have Pam and then Diane. That's great.
Yeah, so I'm going to shamelessly borrow a quote that one of my colleagues utilized as we're thinking about our future work design and what do we need to look like and what roles could be remote, long term. But there's a quote by Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. That says, "A mind that is stretched by a new experience can never go back to its old dimensions." So I think the aha moment for us is that we need to evolve and take advantage of the opportunity and the experience that we've had in order to think about doing things differently. We've talked about this in variations throughout the discussion, but the expectation that our employees now have of their employer is different.
Yeah.
And the expectation that employers have of their employees is now different. So that value proposition and that informal handshake between the employee and the employer has evolved. So that was kind of our big aha moment, or I'll say my aha moment, and that our HR team is now trying to focus on, okay, so how has that handshake changed? And how do we need to make sure that we're meeting the expectations of our employees and that they understand what the company is going to do for them and how the company will invest in them and what the company expects back from them as well. Pam mentioned that kind of self-directed learning and having the ability to that. So we'll make those tools available, but we need you to take advantage of them and take the initiative and own your own careers and things like that. So we're kicking off some work at Radian around our employee value proposition and refining that and kind of making sure that we can tell the current story in terms of what our employees can expect from us and what we expect back from them and engage external prospective employees as well. So that's my takeaway.
That's great. Thank you. And then Pam? Your
Um,
aha moment.
Well, it's hard to pick one. There were so
There were
many
so
of them,
many,
so
right?
many of
For
them in
sure.
2020 for sure, and they're just continuing into 2021.
They are.
I
Mhm.
feel like people had this, myself included, this unrealistic expectation the calendar was going to flip and something magically was going to change on
Yeah.
January the 1st. And then January 1st got here and we're like, oh, that's more of the same, huh?
The same, right?
Right. Yeah, I think sort of building on what Dana was saying, I think my biggest aha, and it was more of a, I think my biggest aha was that if you give people the space to stand up and do the right thing and do the things that you want them to do, but give them the space and the empowerment to do that, they will do that. And so I think we tend to underestimate sometimes the power of the people that we have working around us to just shine and to demonstrate their potential on a daily basis. And the situation that happened in 2020 sort of forced organizations to be able to do that with their people. And so if you put people in impossible situations, they will show up and do the most impossible, but most amazing things.
That's great. Thank you. And then Diane, your aha moment.
My aha moment. I'm going to talk about global teams. Actually, my aha moment has been around how powerful, and as a silver lining to this COVID and something that we're going to want to continue to do, is create more connectivity. Let's continue to use teams to some degree post-COVID, because there was a situation with I have a global team, and we would meet in team meetings on the phone, not in person, but when they were remote in other countries, but in just that team for that region. And now we've expanded since COVID, and being able to scale as fast as we can. I would then pull in all the regions and have these, now we can see each other on a camera. And it's not just on a call. And I want this person and this team to learn from this team and understand what each other's doing. You may not have any crossroads necessarily, but it's important and a way to, again, planning and be forward thinking and be more deliberate. I wanted a community. I wanted to develop a community. And one of the employees in my Europe, I'll never forget it, she says to me, I always felt, I never want to say anything to you, Diane, but I never felt like a real strong connection to the US team, because we're US based, our global headquarters is in the US. So a lot of the activity comes from the US. And she sometimes always felt like an afterthought, or that she didn't know a lot of times what was going on with the US team. She goes, but since in these last 8 months, I have never felt more connected to all of you in such a powerful way. So I want to foster that. That's my aha. I don't want that to go away. I want to continue that. And it's such a blessing from such a tragedy.
Yeah, that's great. And it's interesting that, even though we've all been thrown into our homes, it seems like we've all become closer or networked or weaved intentionally. We've been doing this and making our closer connections, even though we've been so far apart. And that's the beauty of the resilience. And it's really been great to see. So thank you so much, everyone, for sharing your thoughts and your insights and what your businesses are doing. Really appreciate that. And we love Rocky. He can come into the video anytime, Dana. That is adorable.
Of course, I almost made it through the whole Zoom.
I wasn't letting you go. That's fine. I have some questions here, so I'm just going to look in the chat. I have a few. I'll go through those, and then I can ask. Does anyone have any recommendations on how to better recruit diversity candidates for any of the panel if they want to jump in? That was a question from Sharon.
One of the things that our talent acquisition team has done is they've done a scrub of our job descriptions to try to have more gender neutral role, words throughout the job description, so that it doesn't, in a potentially an unconscious way, someone reading the description feels like, I don't see myself in that role. So that's one thing that our recruitment team has done. They've done a great job with trying to just make sure that our job descriptions were written in such a way that all candidates could picture themselves in that role and doing that work. The other thing that they've done is we've made sure to ask questions of people that were applying for leadership roles, and behavioral based questions around what is it that they've done to foster inclusion and diversity in their past experiences. And doing that in a way to make sure that that it's showing that it's important for us and that we expect this from our leaders, but also giving them an opportunity to kind of share with us, what they've done in that regard, so that we can continue to kind of weave that into the organization. So there are two things that our recruitment team has done that I think have helped with engaging and attracting candidates, from all backgrounds.
That's great. And then Diane, on your end, is there anything you want to add?
The biggest thing that we found initially was access. How do we create more channels of access to candidates, diversity candidates? So NSBE, National Black Society for Engineering Society, we joined that group. We HBCUs, or historical Black universities, we now have identified the top 10 in the nation. So every posting that goes through will go through those channels and help with our net, broadening our net, and being more specific with our net and who we're pulling in, and not just those that look like us. And we're a consulting company, so a lot of the employee or candidates that were being brought in by referrals or by some type of network relationship, whether it was a direct referral or not, but someone's Joe knew Sue and Sue knew Mark, and so on, and they learned about IPS. So when you do that, you are going to network and naturally have relationships with most people that look like you, that think like you, that are in the same circles as you. So we're breaking out of that, creating those different channels.
And then Pam, is there any that you want to add in that you've seen to be able to recruit better diversity candidates?
Yeah, so the tip that Dana gave about leveraging some kind of a tool or a platform to be able to scrub your job descriptions to get rid of biased language, that's a pretty easy, pretty low ticket to entry to do. And I've seen great success with that. But the other thing that I advise my clients when they talk about, we want a more diverse set of candidates, let's get really specific about what does that mean? Like what kind of diversity are we looking to attract? Because that will drive your strategy about where and how you go about identifying the target or that population that you're looking for. It's attracting diverse talents is not a one source kind of thing. You need separate strategies depending upon what you're trying to who you're trying to identify. And going to something that Diane said earlier, which I think is a way harder thing to do than meeting a metric around, we have this many women in our organization, this many people of color in our organization, which is diversity of thought. And so really this is where I think talent acquisition teams and talent management and the HR business partners and business leaders need to work together, which is actually, what are we missing in our team today? Either from an experience perspective, from a skill set perspective, from a diversity, from a thought perspective, what are we missing today? And when we go to hire the next candidate into that team, how do we hire for those things that we're missing? So we have a really well-rounded, diverse team. That is a much more complicated, much more nuanced conversation than we need to hire, 7 women in an engineering department to make sure that we're balanced. But I think you need to be specific about what you're looking to attract or who you're looking to attract and build your strategy around that.
Yep. Thank you, Pam. We have just 5 more minutes left, and I have one more question here that I'm going to ask the panel. Thank you for sharing in the chat. And it's, what kind of challenges in training the new hires do you see? Dana, if you want to weigh in on that.
Yeah, sure. I think the biggest thing that we realized is that we couldn't just rely on chair side and those types of things. So there's been a lot more emphasis on preparation prior to someone joining, making sure that you can let them know where certain things are, making it easy for them to engage, setting up their schedule. Like I had shared my experience earlier, realizing that my poor intern was only talking to me and that she needed to talk to more people, being more intentional with their schedule and their calendar and things like that. Our training team, we have some positions that go straight into a training program that's a couple weeks, and they shifted to virtually. They went through some ups and downs and kinks that they worked through, but for the areas that were not that were onboarding folks that didn't have a structured training program. We had to help our managers with being more intentional, and from an HR perspective, it was really our job to help them kind of think through it. So we're asking them the questions of what are the things that they need to do?
Right.
How are they going to know where to go to get certain things? Do they have we've done a lot with kind of buddying people up to say, this is, if you feel like you have
That's great.
what you may think is a stupid question, there's no stupid question. So
Ask
here's
this
your person
right.
to ask.
Right. That's great.
So we found that those things helped quite a bit.
Yeah,
but it took us a
great.
while.
Yeah. How about you, Diane? The new hire training.
Yeah, so in carrying what they're learning in the general orientation, carrying that into their departments, division,
right,
has been challenging. Them feeling a sense of belonging has been a strain. You know, I feel terrible for anybody that has started a new job during this COVID, because it is so difficult to know, not only just having that real time moment of on the job training that you just can't duplicate in the remote world, but just the knowing who to go to. So we're aspiring to be better at, we have an office buddy type of setting or structure right now. So there is one person that they are connected to that's not their supervisor.
That's great.
Beyond that, you know, how do you build out that network a little bit wider?
And Pam, what are you seeing on the trends on your end for the new hires?
Really similar things.
Okay.
Again, it depends on the role. I have a few clients, Dana, that are in the situation where you described, where new hires were going through a pretty formalized process anyway. For all of them, actually, they were in the process of figuring out how to make it virtual so they could cast that wider net for those types of roles. So they weren't starting completely from scratch, but it, again, like allowed them to leapfrog. And for some of them, they actually got way more resources from a technology and a spend perspective, because now the organization had no choice but to train people this way. So for the training teams and the learning and development teams, it was actually like a windfall for them, because they got to do things that they'd been wanting to do for a few years now. I think the hiring manager and the person's manager just needs to step up and play a way bigger role in making sure that the employees are getting what they need, which quite frankly, they should have been doing all the way along, but HR and others enable them not to do that. I've done that myself as an HR person, but I think, again, it goes back to the leadership expectations that we have for our leaders are changing. And this is an area where they just need to take on a ton more responsibility to make sure that their new employees are getting what they need.
That's great. Thank you so much. So we're at the 1 o'clock, and I want to thank Pam and Dana and Diane for weighing in and sharing with me and our people that are here and sharing with us about their organizations and how they've been able to change and adapt and really thrive through this turbulent time. So thank you so much. Thanks, ladies.
Thanks for having us.
Have a great afternoon, and
Bye-bye.
thank you. This will be recorded and it'll be on our website. Our next event is February 18th. And that'll be a noon event with our new panel, and it's really all about adapting. So thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a great rest of your day. Bye.
You too.
Bye. Thanks, Pam.
Thanks, Pam. Bye, Dina.